Good morning, good afternoon. So nice to see you guys. Welcome back to class. Welcome back to class. My name is Katie. I'm a pastry chef and baking instructor here with my girls. Back with you guys again. And to answer, it scrolled up too fast. Monica, yes, we should do a croissant class. That would be amazing. I would love to do that. So we'll see if we can work that in. I think we're already booked through June on classes. Try to sneak it into like the summer months. Not a great time to make croissants, but we can do it for sure. But today we're making Easter cake pops, which are so good. I just ate one and I feel like the sugar all went to my head. But we're making coconut cake. We're going to roll it into pops with a cream cheese frosting. So they're very nicely balanced. They're not super sweet. They've got like that little mild tanginess from the cream cheese, the nice sweetened shredded coconut. So a really nice combination. We're going to dip them into candy melts. We're hand rolling them into egg shapes. I played around with some different decorations. I was just flicking a few like robin's eggs a few minutes ago, and that worked out pretty good. So we're going to do some of those. We'll do some drizzles, but just a great activity for the whole family. So hopefully, if you're here today live, feel free to bake along for at least part of the way if you can. Or check this out on YouTube in 48 hours, and you can kind of replay and go from there. And Rich, who is amazing and the ultimate hype man, just put the recipe in the chat. So if you're missing that, you'll find it there. But we're going to get started. So when Rich can, you can come on down and I'll show you what I'm working with. Oh, hello. Good to see you too. Hi, Jennifer. All right. So we've got some early stuff, cake stuff, and some finishing stuff. So for the cake, this is a butter-based cake recipe. So I've got unsalted butter. It's nicely softened, not overly so. We've kind of talked about in the past. Don't over soften your butter. And the same is true for cream cheese when making cream cheese frosting. All of these ingredients, if you go too far, if your butter is too soft, if your cream cheese is too soft, everything just gets a little soft. So always just leave your butter out. If it's a warm day, about an hour should do it. Even if it's a cold day, a couple of hours should really do it. You should be able to kind of just press your finger and it leave an indent, but it shouldn't be like super squishy or anything like that. That's going to affect the texture of your batter. So I've also got some granulated sugar over here, nice and basic, some all-purpose flour, some salt, some baking powder, and then a couple of specialty things. So I do have sour cream. That's going to add some nice moisture and tenderness to our cake. Is it salted? This one is unsalted. I've got unsalted, but if you are using salted butter, that's fine. Just cut down on the additional salt a little bit there. So not too much. Yes, exactly. I know. It's not overly sweet, which is nice. I feel like a lot of times cake pops can be just like overwhelmingly sweet, and this one is not. Also, thanks to unsweetened coconut milk, which is ingredient. Make sure you do buy the unsweetened coconut milk. It's going to add great tenderness to the recipe as well and more coconut flavor, which is lovely. Speaking of flavor, I've got my favorite vanilla bean paste, of course, but you can also use coconut extract if you do want a little bit more of that intense coconut flavor. You can swap your vanilla for coconut extract. I'm going to be using one whole egg and one egg white. So that's going to keep our batter a little bit on the lighter side in color, kind of that coconut, color and flavor, which is lovely. So that is our cake. And a couple of questions. So I have people who are allergic to coconut. Is there a substitute? You can, instead of using this recipe at all, because we've got a few coconut things in here, I would say use the vanilla cake recipe we've done in past classes or the chocolate cake recipe we've done, or really any cake recipe that you love. And I'll show you how to just turn that into cake pops. So really, you're not stuck with the coconut recipe to make these cake pops. You can really sub in any cake that you love and go with it that way. I do also have cream cheese frosting that I pre-made. We've made it before in class so many times. I thought, well, no reason to make it again, really. But we're just beating butter, cream cheese, confectioner's sugar, just until really nice and smooth. And this is going to go into our cake pops. So I have it kind of at room temperature, ready to go. And then I've got some decorations. So this cute little sweet tooth berry container had like so many lovely pastel sparkling sugars in it. So I've got like blue and green and yellow. I have these, which are like the little cute little confetti sprinkles that I thought were really sweet. And then also some piping bags just to kind of drizzle. Totally optional. You can also just drizzle with a spoon. So if you don't have piping bags, that's okay. But you will need cake pop sticks. These are pretty long. These are like a 6-inch size. You can go shorter, you could go longer. And if you don't have cake pop sticks, you can just shape these and dip them into the candy melts and just do like cake ball style. So I know I said you had to have these, but you really don't need to if you don't want to. But they are great to have. Other than that, we do need a cake pan to bake our cake in. So I've got a 9-inch size. And I also have, let's see, what else? Of course, we have candy melts that I've melted, but they don't need to be melted if you're just starting here with the recipe. They'll be melted at the end, but I have them ready to go. So I have a few different colors of those that we'll kind of play with. And I believe that's pretty much it. I have some leftover cupcakes. Yes, that's a great idea. This is a great way to use up leftover cupcakes. Nothing better than making cake pops with leftover cupcakes. And you get to use the frosting and the cake as well, which is so nice. Usually, if I have leftover cupcakes, I'll just kind of break apart the cupcake and the frosting part, crumble my cake first, and then add the frosting as needed so you don't overdo it. That could be really helpful there. All right, so I'm going to start by preparing the cake batter. So I'm going to get my butter in. And this is just a simple creaming process cake batter, nothing too complicated here. So I'm going to lop in my butter and my sugar and just give them a mix just to combine until they're nice and lightened, smooth. Oh, I do not eat eggs. Okay, so hold on 1 second. I know you guys probably can't hear the mixer, but I want to make sure you can hear me. I'm just going to crack this for a second and then we'll get to that one. Okay. One more second on the TV. Grab a spatula. We're looking pretty good. So if you cannot have eggs, I would say any sort of egg replacement is fine. People have used like the flaxseed in water situation. They've used like plant-based egg substitutes. But anything that you prefer, or you can just do this with a completely, egg-free recipe. If there's an egg-free recipe that you love, feel free to sub in any cake recipe that has worked for you in the past. Because cake pops, of course, are so easy to customize. So you can really use anything you prefer. Bye, Carla. Carla said bye. Bye, Carla. Can you use egg beaters? Yeah, you can use egg beaters. Absolutely. For sure. All right, so we're beating in. So I added a little bit of I added my egg white first, just to kind of mix in nice and smooth. And then I'm going to add my whole egg in as well. And just beat it up a little bit here. Then we're going to add in the rest of our wet stuff and dry stuff. So at this point, if you notice any butter, like I've got some butter kind of hanging around the sides of my bowl here, just going to give it a scrape down just to make sure everything is really nicely incorporated. Don't want any bits of butter hanging out. Perfect. Right. One more quick mix here. All right. So then I got the rest of my good stuff. So I've still got my coconut milk, my sour cream, my flour. All of that is going to go in. Let's get in our sour cream first here. And I do love recipes with sour cream. If you don't have sour cream, you can also use something like Greek yogurt. Be a good substitute. We'll just beat that in a little bit as well, just to make sure it's all nicely combined. All right, and then our dry stuff. So again, like we've sort of talked about in the past, once the dry stuff goes on, we don't want to overwork it. So I'm just going to get all my flour, my salt, my baking powder, my coconut I'm going to save for the end, but I do have my coconut milk. And again, this is unsweetened coconut milk. Don't want to use the sweetened stuff. Just make sure it says that on the can. All right, and we're just going to beat until smooth. Nice low speed. All right, and that's it. So all I'm going to do is fold in my coconut, but you can see my batter is really nicely combined in just a couple of minutes. Just lovely. Like a nice quick cake batter. Scrape all that off. Mhm. Put this aside. All right. So just give it a good scrape, make sure everything is really nicely incorporated. And then at this point, if you haven't already, the oven should be preheated. So I believe this one is a 350. So go ahead and fold in my coconut. And you can use desiccated coconut also if you feel like the sweetened shredded is a little on the sweeter side. You could go for desiccated also. And it even has a finer texture, which can be helpful when we're rolling, just to really keep the cake pops nice and smooth. You can, yeah, you can definitely skip the coconut. Any sort of mix-ins that we add at the end of the cake batter, you can always skip. You could even swap it for something else, like if you like little mini chocolate chips in there or something fun, you can always kind of change it up a little bit. All right, so I just sprayed my cake pan just to make sure it's nice and nonstick. And then I'm going to go ahead and line with parchment and get my cake batter in. And it's a nice thick batter, which is kind of fun. I like a nice thick cake batter sometimes. Something very satisfying. All right. So just spread this out nice and even. Perfect. And then this is going to bake just until the cake is nice and set. It springs back to the touch. It doesn't get overly golden brown. So don't look for like a golden brown color, but just give it a check with a wooden pick or a cake tester. Make sure it comes out clean. You're good to go. All right. So I'm going to set this aside. So I have a cake that I already baked. I took half of it to roll cake pops. And I do have half here. So I cut it right in half. So let's take a look at what this looks like. Can you combine both coconut and chocolate chips? Yeah. I would even, depending on how much stuff you love in there, you can have it and do half the amount of coconut, half the amount of chocolate chips. That'll probably be a good place to start. But if you really like a lot, like a very mix in heavy batch, you can even add a little bit more. Let's take a look at the crumb here. So we've got a nice tender crumb. It's nice and dense, but it's buttery, it's tender, really nice for crumbling up. And you can see it's got that light color on the top, so don't look for a ton of color, but it does get nicely golden on the edges there. And this is just half of my 9-inch size. So you're gonna see this does make quite a few cake pops. You can even have the recipe and do a 6-inch cake size, that would be fine. All right.
So Trisha
Yeah.
is wondering what makes a cake light and fluffy. Hers usually turn out to be dense and heavy.
Yeah, I would say typically if a cake comes out dense, it's overworked, is typically the reason. So, obviously the recipe can definitely have an impact also if it's a cake that just is a dense cake, like a pound cake, or something like that. But typically, if you either have a heavy hand when you're measuring your flour, like sometimes I'll watch my mom measure flour and she takes the measuring cup and then she shakes it, and you end up with so much more flour in the cup than maybe is intended in the recipe. So first of all, like spoon and leveling is always a good way to do it, or weighing your flour on a kitchen scale can be helpful also. And then overworking. So like if once we add our flour, if I just keep beating my batter, what happens is that gluten is created, making a more rubbery and dense texture. So that can really change it as well. Look how fun this is. Do you ever put cookie spray on the sides of your pans? Yeah, so I did spray. I sort of like generally sprayed the pan. I do kind of do the sides and the bottom when I spray. But yeah, any sort of nonstick spray, definitely. All right, so we're just giving it a crumble. This is probably my favorite part of making cake pops. You can also pop this in a food processor as well, or in your mixer and beat it up just to break up all those crumbs. And if you're really particular about color and you want to trim off the golden edges, you could do that before you crumble. But I just feel like why waste cake, Gotta enjoy your cake. All right. So just mixing it up here. Hold on one second. What do you mean? My dog's eating something and I don't know what it is, but it's fine. Can you put the measurements in grams? Oh, yeah, I can do that. Yeah, definitely. And flour is always 120 grams per cup. So anytime you're measuring flour, I would say just, 120 grams per cup, and then just divide or multiply by the amount that you need. And I do always, I don't always weigh all my ingredients because sometimes you're just moving and it's like one egg, stick of butter, no big deal. But I do always weigh my flour because I feel like it's just everything comes out so much more consistent that way. All right. So I've got my cake crumbled. I've got crumbles. And I do have a couple of bigger crumbles in here, but it's pretty good. We're looking pretty good. Can you use store-bought cake? Yes. Yeah, you can absolutely. Any kind that you love, any sort of cake. The downside is that you're probably going to use, if you buy a cake, let's say, that has frosting on it already, you might as well just use that frosting instead of making your own. But store-bought cake is always just a little too sweet for me, I find. But you can use any cake that you love. You can use box cake mix and make your own frosting. Anything that you prefer. Cake pops are so fast and easy. You could just make it work with whatever you need. So I've got the batch as described in the recipe here for my cream cheese frosting. I think it was 4 ounces of cream cheese. And all I'm going to do is work this together. So for me, my pet peeve with cake pops is when they're like really gummy. When you open them up and you bite in and you're like, is this cake? Is it like a gummy cake, And I find that like overworking at this point when you're adding your frosting really does change the consistency. And so having like a light hand, I'm just sort of like tossing nicely, combining really nice and even. I'm not like kneading it or overly working. I'm just sort of like tossing the ingredients together. Yes, and I do cool the cake because speaking of gumminess, a hot cake with frosting will do exactly that. It's going to gum up your texture and kind of melt your frosting in the process. So you lose out on that lightness. Even though we're working it, we're not like going over the top. So you see, as soon as it's combined, I've got like a nice combined texture. If I squeeze this, it's going to hold. I did, yes. I put the cream cheese frosting in the cake. Somebody asked, did you put frosting in the cake? I did. This is with the cream cheese frosting that I made ahead. You'll find it in the recipe. And if you are using, let's say you are using a store-bought frosting. Let's say you made the cake and you're using store-bought frosting. The key is just start with a little bit. Start with like half a cup of frosting, depending on how much cake you're working with. Toss it in like we did and just check the consistency. Is it holding together? Can I mold it? Can I shape it? If not, add a little bit more. But cake pops you can really make by eye, which is kind of like the most fun part, especially if you're baking with kids. They can add a little frosting, see does it hold together, add a little bit more. It's almost like a fun science experiment, which can be really fun. So we are going to roll this. So I'm just going to grab a small baking pan or a baking sheet lined with parchment. So this way, as we roll our cake pops, they're not going to stick. Ooh, scoot over for me. Thank you. And I'm rolling these by hand. Now, if you're like a total perfectionist and you really want a perfect egg shape, you can also get egg molds. You can even use like, you'll find sometimes for Play-Doh, they have like that 3D egg mold just to make it for Play-Doh. You can steal one of those, clean it really well, and push your cake balls in there to make perfect eggs. That can work also. But all I'm doing is kind of starting with a ball, just like this. And then I'm just going to kind of round it out to more of an egg shape. So depending on how perfect you like your egg, you could just kind of like oblong it a little bit, just like that. And if you want them to all be really consistent, you can start by scooping first. This way they're all about the same size. And then you could form each one into that egg shape. That's about it. If there's any areas that are not smooth, you can go back, you can roll them again. Depends on how perfect you want them to be. It's a very zen activity. You just like hang out, rolling cake pops. I feel like in the bakery, this was one of my I don't want to be disturbed activities. I would just roll, just roll cake pops in the corner, There we go. All right. So again, just a nice clean ball. and then just oblong it a little bit, just into an egg shape. And now these are going to chill until they're really nice and firm. So it's always good to freeze them if you can, even if it's just for an hour or so, just to make sure that they're really nice and set so they're not going to fall apart or fall off of our stick. And at some point, if you are sort of sitting them down like I am, you'll notice they sort of develop a flat bottom. So it could be helpful even after, let's say you pop them in the freezer for about 10 minutes. Just pull them out once they're set a little bit and just give them one more roll or just rotate them a little bit just to make sure they stay really nice and egg shaped kind of all over. They don't get that flat bottom to them. They're so cute. All right, so I'm going to stop rolling these for now because we have some that are already rolled and chilled. I'm going to set this aside. And at this point, you're going to want to let them freeze until they're really firm. So depending on how long you have, if you want to do that a day ahead and leave them in the freezer overnight, if you want to do it a couple of hours ahead, they should really be frozen until they're nice and firm all the way through. So depending on the temperature, I would say, really let them go at least an hour or two to make sure that they're really strong. For any frosting, what do you add to change its consistency? Yeah, you can whip store-bought frosting if you want to lighten it. You could definitely do that, or you can even add something like a little cream cheese to store-bought frosting and just beat it up a little bit. That can balance the sweetness, which is really helpful. But yeah, you can just take it and pop it in a mixer and whip it. And store-bought frosting can lighten up really nicely that way. So that's definitely a good option. All right, I'm gonna scoot this over here. So at this point, you are going to want to have your candy melts ready. So I've got a few different colors and I might have to pop them back into the microwave. I just microwave these in short spurts, so about 30 seconds at a time, stirring occasionally just until they're really nice and smooth. And if they're too thick after you melt, you can add a little bit of coconut oil or a neutral oil just to thin them a little bit. And that way they'll be nice and ready for dipping. Yes, and the half will make quite a few egg shapes. It's probably gonna, I'll count how many I have, but at least like 3 dozen total for the whole cake, for sure. And I do cover the pops. So I just wrap them in plastic wrap before I freeze, just so they don't pick up any freezer odors. That's helpful. But do remember after that first 10 minutes to kind of rotate them, and then you can go ahead and wrap them at that point. All right, so I'm gonna pop these back in just for a few seconds, just to warm them up a smidge. Let's see if I can fit them all in one shot. I think I can do it. Let's see. We'll try it. Okay. If you use an egg mold, do you freeze the cake pops in the mold? No, you could just use them for shaping. So once you press into a mold, pop them out right onto your baking sheet and then go ahead and freeze from there. And the refrigerator will work, but they won't be quite as firm. So it is helpful, I find, to freeze. I think freezing, for me at least, I've had the most success. They'll be nice and firm that way. I know one of the classes you did a whipping cream of 1 cup heavy cream and 1 cup, a quarter cup. Yeah. 1 cup of heavy cream to about, I would say like 2 tablespoons of confectioner's sugar would be great for that. But whipped cream for cake pops is tricky because the beauty of frosting is that it has butter in it. And butter is going to help firm up the texture of your cake pops. Whipped cream won't really do that same thing. So not as easy to use whipped cream, I would say. I would go definitely for more of a standard frosting for cake pops. Let me go a few more seconds and I'm going to pull out the ones that I've got. And the other thing you are going to want to have is some sort of vessel to stand them up in. So a styrofoam board can be really helpful. I'll show you mine. I have some I was dipping earlier. But if you have any sort of styrofoam, and obviously you can get these at Michael's, you just grab one of these. It was like a couple of bucks. And this way you could just stick them in. You'll also find cake pop holders that you could just stick them in as well. And you can even serve them out of those. That would be helpful too. But something to put them in is important. I've got my cake pop sticks like we talked about. I've got my candy melts nicely melted. Just give those a little bit of a stir and just make sure they're really smooth, really pourable. And I did use colors straight from the bag. So these are like just the standard colors. If you do buy just white candy melts and you want to color your own into a variety of pastel shades or anything for Easter that you love, just use those oil-based candy colors. So your gel colors won't work quite as well for candy melts. But you'll see gel colors that have, candy written right on the package. And that's an oil base, so that's going to work in nice and smooth into your mixture. All right, so I'm going to grab them out.
Which candy melts do you use, Katie?
Oh yeah, so I use straight from my house. I'll show you what I'm using. So I have another bag. I do. These are the, what I use here. This is the new one that they've got, the Milk Craft. I've got a bunch of Milk Craft colors. Oh, and a colander is a great idea. Thank you, Sandy. That's a great idea. But yeah, the Milk Craft. That's what I've got. All right, so let's get started. So what you are going to want to do is just prep your cakes pops a little bit. So you can see they're nice and firm, ready to go. And what we're going to do is just kind of glue them onto our stick. So depending on what colors you're working with here, just a little bit on the stick and then just plump it right on in there. So it's ready to go. And that's going to help it just stick to the mold. If you want to go ahead and if you're using styrofoam, you can kind of pre-make your holes so they're ready to go in there. Just kind of squeeze them in. I like this variety of colors we've got. Go in there. There we go. Yeah, that was a great idea, Sandy. I would not even thought of a colander. Super smart. All right. And now if you have a lot like I have, you may not want to leave them out all at once. So a few out at a time, depending on how quickly you're going to be working. You can even prep, 6 or 8 at a time. And then the rest, just put them back in the freezer. So this way they're going to stay nice and cold while you work. That chill that you've got going isn't going to be lost. All right, so just do one more here. I'm going to put these away. And we'll start dipping. Okay. Stacy, oh, did she really? Well, thank you, Stacy. I missed that one. Thank you for that. All righty. Let's get these out. So the first thing we're going to do is just dip. And then we're going to decorate. So step 1, dipping. So as easy as it sounds, you can see I used blue for this one. So I'm going to use this in the blue. Just going to dunk it right in, give it a swirl. And then just let the excess drop off. So I'm just kind of plunking on the side just to let it drip until it kind of stops dribbling. You see, I still have some dripping off there. I'm going to get all of that excess. And once it's all off, I'm just going to put it right back on into my styrofoam where it came from. And oh, I chose another blue. Wow. All right. So same deal. Just kind of rotating. And these are really helpful. These little silicone bowls, I feel like are so much fun and you could really get right in there. But if you don't have these, any sort of microwave bowl will work. Just make sure it's something that's deep enough that you could really plunge them all the way in. But you could also use a tall drinking glass if you've got a lot of these going. Just making them nice and smooth. All right. We've got a white. See, I'm just knocking off the excess. And these are pretty colors, but they're pretty vivid. So like if you want a lighter shade, you could really even just start with the white candy melts, add a little bit of that gel-based color. Ooh, excuse me. Pardon me. Okay. Just to get it the shade that you like, depending on, the crowd and your party and what you're doing. Okay. A few more here. Yellow. Mhm. Oh, yeah. And Rich just said, if you'd like to show us something you made with what you learned today, post it to social media, tag Michael's classes, make it with Michael's, and learn with Michael's. Should be so fun. Somebody posted the other day, I forget what it was. I think it was the rainbow cake. And I saw their rainbow cake and I was like, oh my God, what? So much fun. All right, so once these are all dipped, you can see because the cake pops are already so nicely chilled, the coating chills pretty quickly and sets pretty quickly. So we can go ahead and decorate right away. If for some reason it's a warm day, you could pop them back in the fridge for a couple of minutes just to help them set up, or in the freezer. And then we can go ahead and decorate from there. Hello, Sky. Ah, there we go. My frosting always gets cold before I can finish dipping it. If that's the case, I would say make sure, give it a feel. Make sure your candy melts are really nice and warm when it goes in. If for any reason, they're melted, but maybe they've sat around a little while and they're more at room temperature, just heat them up a little bit more just to make sure they're really nice and liquid. And feel free to add a little bit of that oil as well, whether it's coconut oil or vegetable oil, just to make it nice and thin. So you can kind of plunge in, it'll come right off, and then you can go ahead with it. All right, so depending on what you've got, so if you've got a piping bag, you can grab one. I'm going to use some of these to just drizzle over the cake pops, but you can also use a spoon to drizzle as well. I'm just going to take some of this, and we're going to do sort of like a monochrome for some of these. Take some of my pink. Maybe I'll take a little bit of my yellow. Come with me. I love these bowls because you could just sort of like pick them up and smoosh them. All right, good. So for drizzling, it is helpful to either drizzle over this, or you can set up a sheet pan with another sheet of parchment paper so you could reuse the candy melts after. No, and actually these were from Michael's. I got these in the baking aisle. It was a 4-pack. It comes with 4 different colors. I love them. I use them all the time. I feel like I talked about this last week too. I was like, I love these bowls. All right, so the key is when I snip the tip, I'm going really, really small. Remember, you could always cut more, but the smaller you clip them, kind of the nicer the drizzle will look. So, for example, I'm going to take this guy and I'm going to drizzle some pink over. So again, depending on how you want to do this, you could do it right over the bowl. You could do it over a sheet pan with parchment. And all I'm going to do is kind of test it first, make sure it's a nice thin stream. And then I'm just going to go back and forth really nice and quick just to kind of finish it off, just like that. So super easy. If you want to get the other side, go back, flip it over, and get the other side as well. So just a super cute, simple. At that point, while it's still wet, if you want to add some of that sparkling sugar, that would stick on really nicely. Maybe we'll do that for the next one. Let's get some of that over here. Get it ready to go. And you do have to work quick with that. Just before it sets. So just a fun little cute cake pop. Fun for kids and adults alike there. Now I did play with, we have sort of like a robin's egg situation. So I'm going to do some of that. Let me do some of these yellows also first. Again, snip it really nice and small, so tiny. Could spin as you go, get the whole thing in one shot. I'm going to do some of the blue. Just for a little bit of pizzazz there. Like pixie dust. It is like pixie dust. Yeah. Do one more of those. A little more blue. I feel like that's fun. It's just like sparkly and fun and really simple, but like very elegant. And it's nice to have a mix of different ones. So if we want to do something a little bit more fun, let's see, I'm going to save the blue for the robin's eggs, but let's say we want to do a little bit of like a classic egg design. A cute idea would be to drizzle other colors on the pops, the white and the pink. Yeah, totally. And we could definitely do some of that too. Now this gets slightly more complicated, but if you want to do like a little bit of a classic Easter egg situation, could do like a little bit of a line going around. Same with the top. We could do some sort of line in the middle. We can add some of these guys. So just a little bit of glue in a couple of spots here. And I'm going to add on some of my confetti. Cute little Easter egg. So you could do ones like that. You can have so much fun with these. But yeah, I do want to show you the robin's egg because I thought that was so cute. So for a robin's egg, the blue ones I have, I took a little bit of cocoa powder and water, but you could probably do it with black food coloring also, although that's not as fun. All right, I'll put this aside for now. And all we're going to do is flick them just a little bit. So I've got my cocoa. Took about a teaspoon of cocoa and just thinned it, almost to like if you imagine like an espresso, that kind of texture, and just a regular paintbrush. And I'll try not to make a mess everywhere. I've already flicked my kitchen once. Let's see here. So I'm just going to set one down. And if you do want to set them down to decorate, you could also take like little mini cupcake liners and just set them down that way. This takes off some of it, and then just with your finger, we're just going to flick. So you get like this cute, I could do more, but you get like this little robin's egg blue, which is so fun. And it does add like a little chocolate too, which is nice. I feel like chocolate and coconut go really well together. So fun. Little robin's egg. Line them up to spell Happy Easter. I like it. Do it. But yeah, we could definitely do different colors, different ways. And you can also do much more of the, let me wipe this down, much more of the sanding sugar as well, which is so fun. I've got a little bit of this yellow. Let's do like a thicker line a little bit. Come on out. Do just one line going around. And then let's say we're just going to dip. Oh, that stuck to the whole thing. Just kidding. Don't do that. Let's do one more. Ballard. We'll do some pink. Maybe make a nest with the coconut and put eggs in it. Oh, that would be so cute. You know, it's funny. I filled my jar to stand them up in with sugar, but now that I'm thinking about it, coconut mix is so much more fun. I should have done coconut. My very messy piping, but still cute. Dress it up a little bit. So fun. Yeah, and so then, let's see, let's play them up a little bit here. So I do have, I was just saying, I would fill this with coconut, but I do have just a jar filled with sugar, which is kind of just a fun way. Or again, you can buy those candy, those cake pop holders, which are very nice. And if you skipped the cake pop stick and just do cake eggs, like little balls, you can just line them up on a platter in mini cupcake holders. This guy in the middle. Right in there. And you can lay your little eggs around, which is so fun. You can bag these up in cellophane and give them as gifts, have them as individual pops, anything that you like. But it's just a fun, family-friendly activity, which is really fun. You could stick them in an orange or apple. That sounds fun. So the downside to freezing them decorated, I will say, is that the condensation, once they thaw, it tends to affect the outside. So typically I would say freeze them undecorated if you can, like pre-make the egg balls, store them in an airtight container. And then when you're ready, you could just pop your cake pop stick in. You could go ahead and decorate and they'll be ready to go, which is so fun. So definitely go that route if you can. I'd be hard pressed to keep the kids and the adults from getting, yeah, definitely. But what's fun is, let me bite it so you can see. Dun, dun, dun. They're very yummy and nice and tender. And you see, they're not gummy. They're just like nicely cakey in the middle because we didn't overwork it and we didn't add too much frosting. So it's a really lovely texture. They're not too sweet, which is lovely. And yeah, so egg shapes I ended up with, let's see, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 11. Hold on. 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18. I ended up with about 18 out of a half cake. So it should make at least 3 dozen. If yours are a little smaller than mine, it might make more, but at least 3 dozen out of a full cake. What is the trick of the candy? Yeah, I know. That is a problem. So you could see here. So like my bag, it's starting to set up on the ends. So usually it's helpful. You could even like hold on to the tip and run it under hot water for a second and just kind of smoosh it around. But if it's all liquid here and just a little bit at the tip, just force out that end. And then it should be pretty easy to use from that point. So depending on how much of it is set, you can also just leave it over, sometimes I'll leave a pan over like some steaming water just to keep it warm and just set it right on top. That'll keep it warm as well. But yeah, it is a lot. If you do want to make less than the 3 dozen, you can have the cake recipe, just bake it in a 6-inch pan instead. And that way you come out with less. So you could definitely do that too. And gluten-free flour substitutes, I would say you could just make this cake exactly as written, just with a gluten-free all-purpose, baking flour blend. Any swap that you love, like cup for cup, you could just go ahead and switch it up. Oh, and thank you, Rich. So next week we've got Easter brioche buns, which are so fun, and egg baked right in the middle, which are so cute, and they're dyed for that. But yes, thank you guys so much. Thank you for joining me today. I hope to see you next week for more Easter fun, which is so lovely. And then the week after that, I'm going to be in my new kitchen, which I'm very excited about. So I'll see you from there. But thank you so much. Happy baking. See you next week. Thank you. Happy Easter.